Welcome back, CSC 235, to part 3 of our ex3 form that we're working on. And in part 2, we were working on the CSS. And in part 3, we're going to continue with the CSS and also try to solve a problem that I was perplexed by in the previous video working with all these percents. And like I said, I did things a little bit differently and some things popped up and I'd like to kind of figure them out. So it took me a little while to figure it out. And one of the things was in my code, why do I have to have this at 72%? Where's the math that's saying it can't be 73? And one of the things that came up was this margin right. So if I increase the margin right of label, that kind of adds to it. I have to go down on that. So if I made that 3%, I'd have to make that 1%. But that wasn't the issue. I also thought it was the form panel, this 3% on either side adding up, because that made sense. It was like, oh, 3%, 3%, that's 6%, plus the 2% here, that's 8%. That's why I had to make this 72%. But it still didn't make sense. So finally, I was perplexed enough to look again, and I looked in my inspect palette. And when I was on the field, let me get on the field. There's the field. And notice how it's going all the way over to the left. And that's because the label class is floating to the left, but the field class is not floating. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to, except floating removes it from HTML flow. So since it's not floating, since the field isn't, it's still there, it's being overlapped. It's not pushing anything out of the way. It's pushing it out of the way, but it's still overlapping. It's still taking up that entire space. So the div field is still taking up all that space over here to the left, where the label is. So that's where that extra space is coming from. So what I did was just go to the field and give it a float left. I'll put float left. Now you could do float right, but I'm going to do float left so that they're both floating left. So they're both removed from flow. Now we don't have to go into a whole floating thing right now, but I just want to solve where that's coming from. Now if I do this, watch what happens. Okay, it breaks. But it's an important break because you can see it's breaking outside the container, and there is a fix for that. And I had to look it up because I haven't done it for a while, but the proper fix, well, not the proper, but the one I always used to use is the enclosing container, which is form panel, that they're in if you do overflow auto. If you go to overflow and do auto, that should make everything fit in there. So let's try it now. I close this up. And it's still broken here. Let me just try something. We have form panel is overflow auto, and we have field is float left, and we have label is float left, and field input is still 72%. Let's go back here and refresh this again, because I should be able to go in here and put in. Let me put on 100%. Okay, now that's working. It's extending it now, but we still have the issue. The issue we could have now is because they're now in the same space. I think it's this. I think if I change my field from 80% to 78, because now I think that's being affected by it. Let me try this. If this fixes it, then I think I'm okay. And that fixed it. So, and now look, this 100% goes all the way over. So that's what's happening. Now that they're both floating, they're taking up the same space. So you can't have it go over 100%. So it was 20% and it was 80%, and then we have this margin right, which was 2%. So now if I just tone that down a little bit, so if I add any of these, I'd have to put this down. But I can put my field input at 100%. I thought I could. I was wondering, why couldn't I extend that all the way over? Now, it doesn't look good all the way over. There's no reason to do that necessarily. But I felt like it should. And now, if I inspect this, and I look at that, I won't see. I'll go in here. I'll click on field. I should see the field itself, if I can get around here. Oh, there I'm seeing field. You see I'm on it, and see it's going, it's now starting at the left. It's not overlapping anymore. So it's working now. So now I could go to 100% if I want. Now, kind of figure that out. So that was a little more than I expected for that. But, you know, hey, a little math is good for you figuring out these percents. So overflow auto, this you know, keeps floats inside container. I'll put a little comment there, and I'll do, so that's telling me that, and I have both of these floating, so they're side by side. I have the label class is floating to the left, and I have the field class is floating to the left. And now I just have to make sure that they don't take up more than 100%. And the margin right is 22%, and the width, and then this is 78. So whatever I change there, I have to do that. Now I don't want this at 100%, but let me just put 90 and see how that works. Now it's 90. That looks okay. I don't know if anybody has a name that long, but I could even put more space here if I want to put more space to the right of my label. If I want to put 3% or try 4% just to see what it looks like. Now it's going to break it. Remember, it's going to break it because now this has to go down to 76. Now it works. That looks okay. And what we're going to do next is focus on a media query so that when it gets smaller, we're going to, I think, go to 640, I think I was looking at. So you can't see the size unless you go to inspect. You can see the size. And I think I'm going to have it break at 640. And I'm not doing mobile first. So I'm going to have it break here and then basically extend the percentage of what this is. And obviously when they go on one line, I don't want it aligned right anymore. They look good aligned right here, but not when they're stacked on top of each other. So, because they'll be over here. So we don't want to do that. So I think it's 640. We could go closer, but I think around 640. I think what I'll do is I'll just make this come out. So we'll do a media query. So we got to look up media query again, the max width, because we always forget how that works. So let me just look up media query. I'll just put W3 schools. This is what I like to do. W3 schools, because I don't memorize, for some reason, media queries. They just don't stick in my head. And you could look up CSS media queries. So you could just go down here and find one. And I usually do the max width. I'll highlight this. Now, we don't need the color or anything like that, but I'll take that. And again, I'll change that. And here it's saying if the viewport is less than 480, the background color will be pink. And you're like, well, where's pink? Because this is going in the opposite. I'm going to go max so that when it goes below that, it'll use this. So it's staying light green until it gets to that here, but we're going to change that. We're going to use max width. So I'll go here, and again, you want to put your media queries after everything, and I'll just paste this here, and I'll change this to max, and I'll make that 640, and the only thing I'm going to change, I'll get rid of this declaration in there. I'll highlight form panel, and I'll take everything, and I don't have to keep everything, but I'm going to put form panel in there, and I'm going to tab them over, and I'll tab this over. So it looks nice. So I know they're inside there. I'll backspace so I don't have any extra space. And I'm not changing the background color. Get rid of it. Am I changing the margin? No, it's still going to be auto. Am I changing the padding? No, I think that's still okay. I could change it a little bit if I want, but I am going to change the width. And I had it at 80%. Actually, I think I did it 50% on the other one. That's why this looks so big. I think I did it at 50%. Actually, let me go back, because I wanted it 80% here. But let me go back and do form panel 50%. I mean, that's what I did on the other one. Let me just see this for a second. This is going to be weird, but I'll get rid of everything else. So right now it'll change to 80%. Let's see what this looks like. Okay, yeah, this is the way I had it before. Now this changes quicker now because there's a lot more extra space here at 50%. At 80% it was fine. And now we're like, now it's breaking it that way. So we could find a little mid-range here. Maybe I'll put this at 70% and see if this looks better overall. I'll close this up. Now this is probably going to break sooner now. Breaking right around there. Let me just inspect, and that's breaking around 650. So maybe what I'll do down in the query, instead of 640, I'll make it like 660, and instead of the width at, put it like 85, and maybe I'll make this one 75. Kind of break the difference there. The other one I had a 50% and then it went to 80. I didn't realize I put 80 in right away, but it still looked okay. So let me go back and let's just check it out. Okay, so that's 75%. Now, when I get down to a certain point, it's going to get, see, it's getting a little bit bigger. And it's still going to break at a certain point. And what we might do is break it. Actually, I don't even need that. I think I'm going to put it, sorry for all the changes I'm making here. Maybe I'll just make it 90 at that point. And then we'll do another one at a smaller distance, and we'll see what it is. So let's kind of move here. And you can see it's getting wider there. So we get a little more space, and then it's breaking. So let's see what our break point is here. So I'd say when it gets to 500, or even sometimes people use 480. I'd say once we get to 520, let's just be safe. Kind of looks like 502, 503, but let's just say 520. So let's say for another one, copy this, we'll make another one here. There's another breakpoint, and we'll do 520, and this will be mobile, and then we could go mobile with this. So the form panel will be 100%. What else are we going to change about form panel? The margin, 6% on the top and bottom. We had auto. I guess that's still okay, because if there's no auto, maybe even the padding we might change a little bit, and we might not have a border. So let's just highlight all this stuff here, and we might even turn off overflow auto. So let's just kind of move this in here. We'll copy it. We'll put it back here. Tab these over. The padding, maybe I'll put 2%. We don't need as much padding on a smaller device. And do we need a border? No, I'll put 0. Do we need border radius? No, I'll put 0. Now, why am I putting 0? Because if you just delete it, it's going to keep it what it was. You have to kind of undo it. The only way to undo it is put it here at 0, because otherwise, if you take it away, it just assumes it's still there. So I'm just taking that away. At 0, it just won't show up, and the border radius won't show up. And the padding I made a little less. Overflow auto, I'm not sure about that. I'm just going to leave it in for now. And then what we're also going to do is we're not going to float these things anymore. So we're going to have to highlight label and field and put them in here. Remember, this is the smaller one, the second media query. And I'll tab things over nicely. Again, I copy them all first, and then I get rid of what is going to stay the same. Not what we're changing, but what's really going to stay the same. So as far as our label with 20%, that could be 100%, because we're going to say float none. We're going to get rid of the float. We're going to do text align left, so it flows to the left. We'll leave the margins where they are, maybe even do more. Margin bottom, we might make it a little more. I'll put it up to 4 because we'll have more vertical space. Margin right, I don't know if I really need it. I'll just put 0 for now. I'm not sure if that'll have an effect. And our width, I guess we could just put 100%. And then let's look at field. I'll put width 100%. And margin bottom, I'll put that at 4%. I'll keep them the same. And float none. And let's just see what happens here. Let's refresh. Everything should be the same there. Now let's get smaller. Now it's breaking. Well, we want it to break. That's actually what we want. Although it seems like we need more space below the field and less above the, because now they're all the same. And the select button looks really small down here. Submit. So let's take away, before we do anything, let's take away, we have margin bottom 4% on the field. And let's just put 1 up here. Let's see what that looks like. So this looks okay, looks okay. Gets a little, now that's a little better. That looks a little better. Now we don't have this thing going all the way across. We could. And the color, you can make the whole color of the body change to be one solid color. You don't even have to have this be different. You can have body be that same color if you want. Or you could take away the margin auto. You could take away this thing here, because the form panel is now 100%. You could take away the margin, I guess, and on the top and bottom. So I'll copy that, and I'll go down here. Remember, this is in the small one. I kept the overflow auto there. I don't think that's going to create a problem. But 6% on the top and bottom, why don't I just make it, I don't want it to go too close to the top, but let me just make that half, 3. And margin auto, I'll just put 0 right now. Let's see what happens. And again, everything we're doing looks okay. We're just getting to this point, and that's okay. I think this thing could probably be bigger. We could probably make that a little bit bigger. And we still have that space there. I mean, if we take that out, what we could do, again, another thing we could do is just copy body, and I'll put body first, paste body in there, tab these over so it looks nice and organized, make sure they all line up, make sure the second curly brace, remember there's a curly braces for the query, and then there's curly braces for each declaration or rule set that's in there. Declaration. I call this whole thing a declaration block. I just was watching some video where they call it a rule set. I always called it a declaration block and this a declaration, but technically the whole thing is a rule set, but not everybody always uses the right terminology, including myself. But what I was going to do here is change the background color to be this. So I think I'll just highlight this. Here's the form panel color. Let me copy that. This one should be that color. And I don't even need a border here. So let's, one more time, a lot of trial and error here. Move it over, move it over. Now they're all the same. So we could extend that a little bit if we wanted to go over, or we could even create more margin in there because it's a little tight to the side. That would be form panel. That would be padding on the right and left, which would be, this is top and bottom, that's right and left. I can make that 3%. That might look a little better. And I'm talking about, you know, mobile view like that. Could even be more. Seems a little tight there. Again, I won't keep doing this and torturing you. I'll stop here. So our part 3 video will stop here, and I think that's it with the CSS. If we go back and do some tweaks, we'll go back and do some tweaks. But I think that's okay. We don't have to go nuts on the CSS, even though we did a lot of work here. What we're going to be doing next in part 4 is digging into the JavaScript and seeing how to take information. Now, we're not going to send it to a server right now. We don't have that ability to do it right now, or even to send it to another page. We actually can send it to another page, but that's a little more detailed. We're just going to send it to our own page and just display it down here. So we're going to take information, send it down here, and just pretend we're sending it to another page, just for the time being, just for the sake of simplicity right now, and not dealing with any local storage or not dealing with any server issues right now, just to kind of build up and keep things simple as we go. I like to kind of start simple and build up and kind of work towards it. Although I have to apologize, I think that first quiz with the hands-on stuff and the questions, I even when I was grading it, it was a little more, I don't know, confusing. So I apologize for that. I don't think that was as great as I thought it would be in my head when I did it. So if you struggled with that, I'll be very lenient in terms of any grading on that, since you had to work through it. And even the quiz, it had, when I was grading, it had weird questions and stuff, like it was showing the number twice and all kinds of stuff. So I apologize for that kind of hot mess that thing was. But a lot of people did well on it, so that's okay. So we're going to stop here with part 3, and part 4 we'll dig into the JavaScript, but this will give you some work to do on this for a little bit.